The following broadcast is a presentation of Mount Zion Media Ministry.
Media to put it up so that you can see it. In between your now and your when. In between your now and your when. And I want to say at the outset that I am particularly speaking to the graduates. But what I want to share is applicable to anybody in life who has a desire to do well. Now, if you don't desire to do well, check out right now and find you another church service to watch if you're watching live stream. But if you want to do well in life, no matter where you are at the current moment, stay with me. And then let me also ask you to share this message with others who you think have the same desire as you to do well in life. In between your now and your when. I have become friends with an app called Waze. And many of you recognize that as a GSP app. It gives you direction, and there are several out there, but I love myself some Waze because it gives me information about what's ahead of me. There's a car beside the road, police ahead. Traffic is heavy, so it redirects me, and it gets me to where I need to be. But here is what is critical to Waze working for me. When I put in my destination, it always asks me about my current location. And it asked me that because sometimes I turn my location service off because I don't want all the apps on my phone knowing where I am. They be tracking you, you know. And so I have to turn my location service on so that it can determine my current location because it cannot start my direction to my destination unless it knows where I am. And I want to say to you in a very similar way to the graduates and to anybody that has a desire to do good. Your when in the subject of the sermon represents your destination. And one day, not if, but when you get there, there will be reason for more celebration. But you cannot get to the when without understanding your now. You got to know where you are. And not just in terms of your geographical location, but in terms of your readiness for life. You've got to know where you are. In terms of your mind and in terms of your resources and everything that's available to you, you need to understand clearly where you are. And then you can set the GPS to get you where you need to be. And so today I want to just walk through some biblical principles to help us understand our now, where we really are. And so that brings me to my first two scriptures, and that is 1 Samuel 16, verse 1. And for the past couple of Sundays that I preached, we've been talking about David, so we are back with David again, the third sermon in our series about him. And it says, "And the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil, and go. I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons." And then verse 13 of that same chapter, Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. And what I want to suggest to you this morning is that what you just read is David's commencement service. David's commencement service. I like commencement rather than graduation because commencement recognizes graduation in that you have achieved this milestone in your academic career. But it also represents or recognizes the fact that you are commencing now a journey, because the acquisition of the degree or the high school diploma was not the destination. And so listen carefully now. And so Samuel, the prophet of God, goes on an assignment, and God said it plainly in verse 1 of chapter 16, I have found me a king, and he is at Jesse's house. And I want you to go and anoint him to be the king. And those of you that know the story, Jesse had 8 sons. He brought 7, didn't bring David, and the oil would not pour. And so Samuel said, you got to have another boy. And he said, yes, but I know it's not him. He's keeping the sheep. But long, short of the story is, they go to the sheep and pull David away from shepherding the sheep, bring him. Samuel rather gets the oil and pour, and it starts flowing. And at that moment, David is anointed king of Israel. He gets his diploma, which signifies that he is now chosen to be the king. He gets capped, if you will. He's chosen to be the king. But here is what I want you to recognize. At that moment that he is anointed king, the position is already his, but he does not get to act as king until 16 years later. He's anointed on that day. He's anointed, but he did not get to become king till 16 years later. Saul is king, got the position, but he's been anointed for it anyway. What happened, Pastor? Again, it was his commencement. The position was conferred upon him. But here's something else that happened that is critical. At the conferring of the position was also the clarifying of the vision. God said to him, David, you're going to be king. That's your purpose in life. That's what's ahead of you. You are anointed for it, but it's not yours yet. And so the commencement for you, David, is now for me to take you on a journey to get there. And here is when there are 31 chapters in the book of 1 Samuel. And all of the remaining chapters from 16 all the way to the end is God getting David ready. And then when you move to 2 Samuel and the first 5 chapters, all of that is God getting David ready to be king. And let me show you what this commencement, what this journey, beginning of the journey entails. And I'm going to be just brief when I tell you. First of all, it has to do with preparation. Preparation. God takes these years and prepares David for his destiny. He prepares him in terms of developing his character. Because where God is taking him to be king, character is going to matter more than anything else. Because what happened to a lot of people, sometimes God will elevate them, or they themselves will pursue things and get in places where their character can keep them. And so he's preparing them in terms of their character. And then God is preparing David in terms of developing his leadership skills. You got to have character. That's who you be. But then you got to do something, but your being comes before your doing. So God has to develop who you be before you start trying to do what you do. And so then God starts developing his leadership skills. And when you read all of those chapters in between, 16 in 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel chapter 5, God uses life experiences and exposure to help him develop his character and his leadership skills. Listen, what you learned in the classroom is not sufficient. And the few life experiences and exposures you've had up until this point is not enough to get you and keep you where God is trying to take you. And so you got to avoid the pitfall of youth of thinking you already know everything. There's some life experience you got to have, high and low and in between. And there's some things you got to be exposed to, because listen to me, your family, your hometown, your educational system, the schools and the people you've been with, too limited for the kind of destiny that God has for you. You need to be exposed to something bigger. You need to be exposed to ways you had never seen before. And so God has to take you through some life experience and expose you to some stuff. You want to know what one of the problems with, let me rephrase. One of the challenges our community, the African American community had, we've not been exposed enough to what major success looked like. And so our level of success is too limited. And then for the people who go on beyond our limited view of success, we hate on them. Rather than learning from them, we hate on them. And so there's this preparation of character, of leadership skills. And then here is the third major one that God gets him ready for. God uses this time of preparation for him to develop some key relationships, because he cannot become king and he cannot be successful as king without the right relationships. And so during this time, God connects him through his life experiences and exposure to men and women that help him to develop. But he also invests in these other men and women, getting them ready so that they can be a part of his team once he becomes king. Relationships matter. And listen, you're not going to get the kind of relationships that can take you to the next level if you don't have character. Because people who are operating at certain levels, they don't have time to invest in people whose character is corrupt. I don't want to mentor somebody and I got to worry about you stealing from me at the same time. I don't want to mentor somebody that I got to worry about whether or not you telling me the truth about your current situation. I can't help you if you're a liar. Got time for that. And so understand that you got to have the right people. And so there's this moment of preparation. And I just want to say by way of application, please know, graduates and all of you that want to do well in life, that you've got to let God prepare you. This thing ain't going to happen overnight. Don't think you're entitled to your destination right now, right out of school with this fresh degree. No, it's going to take you some work and some time and to get you prepared. The degree, the diploma was just the commencement. Next verse I want to share with you is 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 4. It says, and the men of Judah came And there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying that the men of Jabesh Gilead were they that buried Saul. At this particular juncture, by the time we get to 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 4, Saul has been killed in battle. And now the kingship that had been promised to David is about to be bestowed upon him. And it is about 9 years later at this juncture from the anointing to this particular passage. But here is what I want to point out to you, that what this passage demonstrates is that you have to be patient during the process. You've got to be patient during this process of preparation as God takes you to your destination and you're striving for it. You got to be patient. Pastor, how do you see patience in that? It says that, first of all, that Saul is dead. I told you Saul was king when David was anointed. And some of the people around David, they were in a hurry for David to become king. And Saul was trying to hurt David, trying to kill David. But on more than one occasion, God put Saul in a position so that David and or his men could have killed him. And at his death, David could have become king. And even before God put him in that position, some of the men with him wanted to kill him. But because David was committed to godly principles, he said, I cannot kill him. I cannot let you touch him, because there's a principle that says, touch not God's anointed and do him no harm, even though he's blocking me and trying to kill me. I can't do to him what he's trying to do to me. He does not honor God's principles, but I will. I'm going to get it, but I'm going to get it right. And I'm trying to tell you that there are going to be a lot of shortcuts to where you're trying to go. And they look like good shortcuts, but a shortcut going to leave you short. And people around you going to give you bad advice, but you got to stand on your godly principles. I want it, but I don't want it bad enough to get it in a way that God don't want me to get it. And then that verse also shows us patience, because when they anoint David as king after Saul's death, they take him to Hebron, and they anoint him king over Judah. The promise was that he would be king over Israel. Israel is comprised of 12 tribes. And each tribe has a particular geographical area of domain. And the vision that God gave David was, you will be king over Israel. But when he's anointed, in chapter 2, verse 4 of 2 Samuel, he's only anointed over one tribe. And he could have said, hold up, this ain't a dream. I'm supposed to have all 12. But it's one. And what David shows is patience. He didn't go to war against the other 11 to force them to come follow him. What he did is accepted the incremental steps in getting to where God wanted to take him. He accepted the incremental steps. Some of us want to take one step and be there. And that attitude gets you in a trap. You follow these schemes, and because you want to get there overnight. It doesn't happen like that. There are steps. And you got to learn to be patient in the steps and not perceive the increments as failure. Because if you look at it and he got one tribe when he was promised 12, somebody might say he failed. But you can't define failure by God's incrementation. His preparation wasn't over. And so God had to use him as a leader of one tribe before he could give him the other 11. And the reason you don't have it all right now, you ain't ready. I'm sorry, it's graduation day, so I got to be a little bit more correct. You are not ready. And so what you do is reign over Judah. You want a six-figure job, and you're not managing the money with that $20,000 job. You're riding in a hoopty, but you want a G-Wagon. You don't even manage that hoopty you got. You want the right relationship. You ain't even in the right relationship with you. And so so you got to learn to manage and just be patient. Wait on it. Wait on it. And let the Lord do it his way. Get you some godly principles. Yeah. Some godly principles and watch God work. And again, I told you I'm not going deep and long today. And so this the next verse I want to share with you is in 2 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." Yeah. And you know what they went on to do in verse 4? In verse 4, they made him their king. He was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. He was about 15 years old when he was anointed. And then at age 23, they anointed him in Hebron. And so you put 7 years of reigning over Judah, 33 of reigning over all of the tribes. He was king for 40 years. And he went down in history as being Israel's greatest king. And God called him a man after my own heart. King for 40 years without being fired. King for 40 years and elevating Israel from a nation of obscurity to the leading nation in the world. From a people who had no identity to a people who became known as the forerunners of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. He's called the Son of David. He got to be king of Israel, and he did it for 40 years. And by the time God got him in the place, the people recognized that that's where he should be. Can I tell you that it's hard to lead people who don't believe you should be their leader? But if you let God do it, then he'll not only get you ready, but while he's in the process of getting you ready, he'll get the people ready. And so the point I leave right there is God can bring your when to pass. You have to trust him. When God gives the vision, when God sets the destiny, it becomes bigger than you and your ability and the people around them. You trust him, and God will bring it to pass. God will orchestrate your steps. God will protect you. During these years that David was being prepared, there were several attempts on his life. But every time God protected him. Because nobody can take you out until God finishes what he's trying to accomplish in your life. And what you've got to do is don't mistake temporary interruptions as God's inability to take you through. Because some of you who have been out there on the journey, in the process, you got fired from a job. Somebody lied on you. Somebody set you up. You got denied the promotion. Stuff happened. And you're thinking God can't do it. But God uses that. God uses that to get you where he needs you to be. All things work together for the good of those that love God and are called according to his purpose. But you got to understand, sometimes God's hand is in the mess. Trust God to get you to your win. And if you trust him to get you to the win, when you get there, trust him to keep you in your win. Young folk, hear me today. I hope that you are pumped up right now, feeling good about your accomplishments, and rightly so. We want to applaud you, and everybody want to applaud you. But in the end, when it's all over, I need you to come down just a little bit and understand that you couldn't have gotten where you were or where you are if the Lord hadn't helped you. And for those of you who are younger, I want you to look at your parents and see the sacrifice that they made for you to get where you are, but then look behind them. There's somebody who was backing them up. And it was more than grandmama and granddaddy, but there's a God who was standing behind them and lifting them and pushing them and getting them what they needed to help you. Don't forget that mama and them had some help too. Yeah, they fortunately had learned to trust God to get you through. Yeah. So in between your now and your when, be sober-minded. Be clear about where you are. You are not there yet. You in the now right now. You're not operating in the when, but I come to tell you, if you just trust the anointing that God has on your life and trust God with the vision that he's given to you, I'm a living witness that God will work it out. That God will get you where you need to be. God has something called grace. And this grace is sufficient to walk you through every trial of life that's going to come your way. And I raise the alarm again. You're going to have some highs, but you're going to have some lows. And then you're going to find yourself in between. But wherever you find yourself on the journey, just know God's grace is sufficient to take you through. Yeah, some of you may get sick on the road, but God's grace is sufficient to take you through. Some of you may have to bow out for a little while because there are interruptions along the way. But just because you bow out, don't give up. But just remember, God's grace is sufficient to get you back in the race. And sometimes the money gonna get funny, gonna look like the resources are not there, but you gotta trust God. Dottie people say he's an on-time God. Yeah, you might not have the tuition before school starts, but if you trust him.
Thanks for watching. Be blessed and continue walking in the light.